One project that I spent a good amount of time on was a game heavily inspired by the puzzle strategy game Into the Breach. At the time I was using Pygame, and this game just seemed like a perfect fit, as it wasn't computationally or graphically too intensive. The game is basically turn-based, where your units need to prevent the enemy units causing collateral damage. But there are a whole load of subtleties and variations to this fairly simple objective, and actually trying to make something that even remotely resembled this game forced me to think a lot about game design. So first things first, I created an isometric grid for the level, a few sprites representing the hero and the enemies, and a basic movement system. Next, I implemented a turn-based battle system where on the player's turn all the player units could move once. After all units' moves were finished, it would be the enemy's turn to move, and after they had finished it would go back to the player's turn, and so on. After the battle system, I gave each unit a restricted movement range, and when they had finished their move, they have a restricted attack range. The still very docile enemies were given some health bars, and player units could now attack them, causing them to be knocked back as well as losing a health point. I really liked the cyan blue floor colour and decided to make the game to have a somewhat cyberpunk aesthetic around it. The next few weeks I started to iterate on how the game should look and play. One idea was to introduce customers that would represent some sort of collateral damage, just like in Into the Breach. Enemy units would then randomly choose whether to attack a player unit or a customer, making enemy turns less predictable. Another idea I played around with was making more use of the level tiles, so I gave the enemies incendiary attacks which would set the tile they attack on fire. Eventually I gave up on this project, mostly because I couldn't get the game to feel fun and challenging. I still might revisit the project in the future and continue to iterate on the game mechanics until I've found something fun. But I certainly had a lot of fun making it, and it was my final Pygame project of the year. At the start of the year, I started to dabble with a game engine called Heaps, which is written in the Hex language. I knew that Dead Cells and Northgard were written in this engine, which are both two games that I really love. I was also looking for a new engine that could do 3D games, but I wanted to stick to the code-centric style I'd gotten used to with Pygame, and Heaps just seemed to fit the bill. There are some useful examples on the Heaps website to help get you started, but the overall documentation is kind of lacking, so you often don't find immediate answers to what seems like fairly reasonable questions. That being said, the source code is really intuitive and pretty easy to follow. In fact, I think this is the first time I've ever used source code as like my main learning resource. The game being played in the background was my first 3D game, and I made it for the Indie Tales Game Jam. It's called Escape Room. The game was far from polished and didn't score super high, but considering it was a new engine, new language, and the first time doing something in 3D, I was kind of pleased with that it even came out as a functioning game. I also did a Ludum Dare 49 submission using Heaps. The game was a little bit meh, but I still learnt quite a lot about Heaps in the process. I intend to continue to use Hacks and Heaps as it's starting to feel quite comfortable now. I found Hacks especially just a really enjoyable language to code in, and I might make some Heaps content and tutorials in the future, mostly because there are almost none out there right now. And I think it's a really great engine, and I think a lot of people would enjoy using it. Well, if learning one game engine and language wasn't hard enough, I wanted to get a better understanding of low-level graphics APIs and how game engines work. I decided to embark on a C++ OpenGL journey, firstly by following the Learn OpenGL tutorials, and then a lot of the VinMatrix OpenGL videos. If you're interested in this kind of thing, I can't recommend either of these resources highly enough. They really are excellent resources. Learning OpenGL was really fun. After getting my head around the basic concepts of vertex buffer arrays, how data is sent to the GPU, and how shaders use this data, it was a lot of fun tweaking shader values, playing with different light models, and experimenting with different visual effects. I had a lot of fun with OpenGL. What was less fun was learning C++. It was like a constant uphill battle. and even after about 4 months I never felt comfortable using the language. The language was so much stricter than the programming languages that I was used to that I felt like 80% of my time was spent thinking about how the code should be written and 20% on how the problem should be solved. Whilst there are probably good reasons for this, C++ just wasn't a language I could dive into without prior knowledge and have fun with. So if I ever use C++ again, I'll definitely need to study a book or follow a course just so I don't feel completely lost when I'm coding. I spent the last couple of months of the year working on an entirely new project, which I'm still working on now. It's not quite in a state where I can show it off, but as soon as it is, I will be making a video about the progress I've made. I'm writing it in Hacks and Heaps, and it's one of the largest projects I've worked on, so I'm quite excited about it. Anyway, thanks for watching this video.